The gun was pressed against my temple, cold and unforgiving, and the only thought screaming through my mind was not about my own life, but about the tiny heartbeat fluttering inside my swollen belly. 7 months pregnant, kneeling on a warehouse floor that reeked of rust and fear, I had exactly 3 seconds to live. I knew this because the man holding the weapon was counting down out loud, his voice dripping with sadistic pleasure. 3, 2. And then the door exploded inward, and the devil himself walked through the flames. Konstantin Vasiliev. The most feared name in the criminal underworld. The man whose number I had accidentally texted my baby bump photo to 6 weeks ago. The man who had turned my entire existence upside down with 7 words I never expected to hear from a monster. He moved like death incarnate, his dark eyes finding mine across the chaos, and in that single moment, everything I thought I knew about good and evil, about heroes and villains, crumbled into dust. But I am getting ahead of myself. To understand how a simple wrong number led me here, to understand why the most dangerous man in the city was about to burn down his empire for a woman he had never met, you need to know where this madness began. Before we continue this incredible journey together, I want to take a moment to connect with you. Drop a comment right now telling me where in the world you are watching from. I love knowing that this story is reaching people across the globe, and your comment helps more than you know. And if you have not already, please hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you do not want to miss what happens next. This story is about to take turns you will never see coming. My name is Delara Okonkwo, and 6 weeks before that warehouse, I was just a woman trying to survive. 29 years old, 7 months pregnant, and completely alone in a city that had chewed me up and spit me out more times than I could count. The father of my baby, a man named Tobias Mercer, had vanished the moment I showed him the positive pregnancy test. Vanished is perhaps too gentle a word. He had looked at me with such disgust, such raw contempt, that his words still echoed in my nightmares. "Get rid of it," he had said, buttoning his expensive shirt, not even bothering to look me in the eye. "Or get out. Those are your only options." I chose getting out. I chose my baby. And I chose to rebuild my entire life from the ashes of his cruelty. I had been staying with my older sister, Yemisi, in her cramped apartment on the east side of the city. She worked double shifts at the hospital as a nurse, and I had picked up freelance graphic design work wherever I could find it. We were making it work. Barely. But we were making it work. That particular Tuesday evening, I had just finished a warm bath, my swollen belly finally relaxing after a day of the baby kicking relentlessly. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror, phone in hand, wanting to capture the moment. My belly had grown so much in the past week, and Yemisi had begged me to send her updates while she was at work. She loved watching the progression, loved imagining her future niece or nephew growing stronger every day. I snapped the photo, just my belly in profile, my hands cradling the curve, the bathroom light casting a soft glow. It was intimate, personal, meant only for my sister's eyes. I typed a quick message, "Look how big we are getting. Baby is doing gymnastics in there today." I hit send without looking. Without checking. Without realizing that my exhausted fingers had tapped the wrong conversation thread. The message was not delivered to my sister. It was delivered to a number I had accidentally saved in my phone 3 days earlier when a man at the grocery store had handed me his business card after I dropped my wallet. I had entered the number thinking nothing of it, planning to thank him later, then promptly forgot it existed. Until now. The read receipt appeared almost instantly. Someone had seen my photo. Someone who was decidedly not my sister. Panic clawed at my throat as I scrambled to check the conversation thread. The name at the top made my blood freeze. K. Vasiliev. I did not recognize it. But something about the single initial, the formality of it, made my skin prickle with unease. I immediately typed a frantic apology. I am so sorry, this was meant for my sister. Wrong number, please delete and ignore. The 3 dots appeared, indicating a response was being typed. They disappeared. Appeared again. Disappeared. For 3 agonizing minutes, I watched those dots dance, my heart hammering against my ribs. And then the message arrived. Congratulations on your pregnancy. However, you should be more careful about who you share intimate photographs with. Not everyone who receives such things has honorable intentions. Consider this a warning, Delara. My phone nearly slipped from my trembling fingers. He knew my name. How did he know my name? I had not introduced myself. I had not signed the message. How could a stranger, a wrong number, know exactly who I was? I spent the next hour spiraling into panic, searching the number online, finding nothing. Searching the name K. Vasiliev, finding fragments of news articles that made my stomach lurch. Organized crime. Money laundering. Bodies found in rivers. And at the center of every rumor, every whispered fear, was a man named Konstantin Vasiliev, known in certain circles simply as the Wolf. I had accidentally sent my baby bump photo to one of the most dangerous men in the entire country. For 3 days, I heard nothing more. I convinced myself it was over, a bizarre coincidence that would fade into a strange anecdote I would tell my child someday. I was wrong. The flowers arrived on the 4th day. A stunning arrangement of white lilies and pale pink roses, delivered to my sister's apartment by a man in an expensive suit who refused to give his name. The card attached was simple, handwritten in elegant script, for the mother-to-be. Take care of yourself. You are being watched, but not in the way you fear. Kilovolt. Yemisi came home to find me hyperventilating on the kitchen floor, the flowers scattered around me like a funeral arrangement. She read the card, her face cycling through confusion, concern, and then a fierce protective anger. Who is Kilovolt? She demanded. Who is watching you? Delara, what is going on? I told her everything. The wrong number. The photo. The name I had found online. Her face went pale. Konstantin Vasiliev, she whispered, as if saying the name too loudly might summon him. Delara, do you have any idea who that is? He is not just some criminal. He is the criminal. He runs half this city from the shadows. People who cross him disappear. I knew. I had read the articles. I had seen the fear in every mention of his name. But I had also seen something else in his messages, something that did not quite fit the monster I had researched. A warning to protect myself. Flowers. The reassurance that I was being watched, but not in a threatening way. What kind of mafia boss sends reassurance to a stranger who accidentally texted him? The second message arrived that night, just as I was trying to force myself to eat dinner. I know you are frightened. Do not be. You have done nothing to warrant my attention, except perhaps remind me of something I lost long ago. I will not contact you again unless you wish it. But know this, as long as you carry that child, no harm will come to you in my city. Consider it a gift from a stranger who understands what it means to face the world alone. I read those words 17 times. Each reading left me more confused than the last. Who was this man? What had I reminded him of? And why did a notorious crime lord care about a pregnant stranger? Against every instinct, against every rational thought screaming in my mind, I typed a response. Why are you doing this? What do you want from me? His reply came exactly 60 seconds later. I want nothing from you, Delara Okonkwo. But if you ever need something from me, protection, resources, anything at all, you know how to reach me. Sleep well. That was it. No demands. No threats. Just an inexplicable promise from the most dangerous man I had never met. I should have blocked the number. I should have moved to another city, changed my name, disappeared into anonymity. Instead, I saved his contact with trembling fingers, and I did the one thing I never expected. I started to wonder about the man behind the monster. 2 weeks passed in an uneasy rhythm. I went to my prenatal appointments, worked on my freelance projects, and tried to convince myself that my accidental encounter with Konstantin Vasiliev was finished. But I could not stop thinking about him. His words haunted me in quiet moments, the way he had called my child that child with something almost like reverence. The way he had mentioned losing something long ago. The way his promise of protection felt less like a threat and more like a sacred vow. Yemisi watched me with worried eyes but said little. She knew I was wrestling with something I could not name, and she loved me enough to give me space while making it clear she was terrified on my behalf. Just promise me you will not contact him again, she said one evening, her hand covering mine across the dinner table. Promise me, Delara. I could not make that promise. And I think she knew it. The 8th month of my pregnancy arrived with a heaviness that went beyond the physical weight I was carrying. Tobias Mercer had resurfaced, not in person, but through his lawyers. A cease and desist letter arrived, warning me against naming him as the father of my child, threatening legal action if I pursued child support, claiming I had misrepresented our relationship. The hypocrisy of it burned like acid in my chest. He had pursued me for months when we first met, showered me with attention and promises, made me believe I was the only woman in his world. And now he was erasing me, erasing our baby, as if we had never existed. I cried that night, ugly, heaving sobs that shook my entire body and made the baby kick in distress. I cried for the future I had imagined, for the family I would never have, for the loneliness that seemed to stretch infinitely ahead of me. And then, without consciously deciding to do it, I found myself reaching for my phone. I opened the conversation with K. Vasiliev. I stared at his last message, sleep well, and felt something crack open inside me. I started typing before I could stop myself. I know I should not be contacting you. I know you are probably not who I should turn to. But I have no one else, and I do not even know what I am asking for. I just needed to tell someone that I am scared. I am so scared of doing this alone. I hit send, immediately regretted it, and threw my phone across the bed as if it had burned me. What was I doing? Reaching out to a crime lord for emotional support? Pregnancy hormones had clearly destroyed whatever common sense I had left. The phone buzzed. His response came in under a minute. You are not alone. Not anymore. Tell me what happened. And somehow, impossibly, I found myself telling him everything. About Tobias. About the lawyers. About the crushing weight of facing single motherhood with nothing but my sister's love and my own stubborn determination. I typed for 20 minutes straight, pouring out fears I had not even admitted to myself. When I finally stopped, exhausted and raw, his reply arrived in fragments. Tobias Mercer. Real estate developer. Connected to several politicians through campaign donations. engaged to a senator's daughter, which is likely why he is trying to silence you. He is terrified his perfect image will crumble. Men like him are always terrified. Give me 48 hours. I stared at the message, my heart hammering. What are you going to do? The response was simple. Nothing illegal. Nothing that will trace back to you. But he will not bother you again. Trust me. Trust him. Trust a man I had never met. A man whose reputation was built on fear and violence. A man who, for reasons I still did not understand, had decided to protect a stranger and her unborn child. Why? I typed. Why are you doing any of this? The 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. When his answer finally came, it was the last thing I expected. Because 18 years ago, a woman carrying my child reached out for help, and no one came. She and my daughter died alone in a hospital because I was too deep in a war to save them. I have lived with that failure every day since. When your message arrived, when I saw that photograph, something in me knew I had been given a chance to do for you what I could not do for her. I will not fail again. I swear it. I read those words through a blur of tears. The monster had a wound. The wolf had a ghost. And somehow, in the chaos of a wrong number, 2 broken people had found each other. 48 hours later, Tobias Mercer's lawyers sent a new letter. All legal action was being dropped. He would not contest paternity, would not demand anything from me, would not contact me again. The letter was brief and reeked of fear. I did not know what Konstantin had done, and I did not ask. But for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. Now I want to pause here and ask you something important. Have you ever received help from someone completely unexpected, someone you never thought would be on your side? Have you ever found kindness in the most unlikely places? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I love reading your stories, and your engagement helps this video reach more people who need to hear it. Take a moment and share what is on your heart. Our communication continued, though it remained strictly through text. Konstantin was careful never to call, never to suggest meeting in person, never to cross boundaries that might frighten me. He checked on me every few days, simple messages asking how I was feeling, if the baby was kicking, if I needed anything. It was surreal. I was being cared for by a ghost, a phantom whose voice I had never heard, whose face I had only seen in blurry photographs online. Yemisi remained terrified, but even she could not deny the changes in my life. He paid off your medical bills, she said one day, her voice flat with disbelief. She had just come from a conversation with the hospital billing department. Every single one. And he set up a fund for the baby's future. Delara, this is not normal. What does he want? I wished I knew. But every time I asked, his answer was the same. He wanted nothing. He expected nothing. He was simply keeping a promise to himself, and to the ghost of a woman and child he had lost. The 8th month became the 9th, and my due date approached like a freight train I could not stop. I was enormous, uncomfortable, and more emotionally vulnerable than I had ever been in my life. My baby shower was small, just Yemisi, 2 friends from my old job, and a neighbor who had become like a grandmother to me. But among the gifts was an unmarked package that made my breath catch. Inside was a hand-carved wooden cradle, more beautiful than anything I could have afforded, with delicate roses etched into the headboard. The note read, "For the little one. May she sleep peacefully in a world made safer by your love. K." I cried. I cried because it was beautiful, because it was thoughtful, because this stranger had shown me more care than the man who had helped create my child. And I cried because I was starting to feel something dangerous, something I had no right to feel for a man I had never met. 3 weeks before my due date, everything changed. I was leaving my prenatal appointment, wadding toward the bus stop with the exhausted determination of a woman whose body had become a vessel for a tiny, demanding human. The city was gray that day, the sky heavy with promised rain, and I was so focused on not tripping over my own swollen feet that I almost did not notice the car. It was black, sleek, and utterly out of place in this working-class neighborhood. It pulled up beside me just as I reached the bus stop, and the back window rolled down to reveal a face I had only seen in grainy photographs. Konstantin Vasiliev was not what I expected. The photos online made him look harsh, angular, all sharp edges and cold menace. In person, he was devastatingly handsome in a way that made my breath catch, dark hair silvering at the temples, eyes the color of storm clouds, a jaw that looked like it had been carved from marble. He was older than me by perhaps 15 years, and every inch of him radiated power and control. But his eyes held something I had not anticipated. Warmth. And worry. "Please get in the car, Delara," he said, and his voice was velvet over gravel, accented with traces of Eastern Europe that made my name sound like poetry. I would not ask if it were not important. "You are in danger." I should have run. I should have screamed. Instead, I found myself walking toward the open door as if hypnotized, as if every text message over the past weeks had been leading to this moment. I climbed into the back seat beside him, the leather soft and cool against my aching body, and the car pulled away before I could change my mind. "What kind of danger?" I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. "And why now? Why show yourself now, after all this time?" His jaw tightened. "Because the danger has a name." Tobias Mercer was not merely afraid when my associates visited him. He was furious. And men like him, men with connections and fragile egos, they do not accept humiliation gracefully. He has hired people. Dangerous people. They have been watching you for the past week. Ice flooded my veins. Watching me? Why? Konstantin's hand moved toward mine, then stopped, as if he was unsure of the boundary. Because he has decided that if he cannot control the narrative, he will erase the evidence. You and the baby are that evidence. I intercepted communications this morning suggesting they plan to move against you within the next 72 hours. The car suddenly felt like a cage. I pressed my hand against my belly, feeling my daughter kick as if she too sensed the danger. What am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? His eyes met mine, and in them I saw a fierce, unyielding promise. You are going to come with me. To a place where no one will find you. Where you will be protected around the clock until I have dealt with the threat. I laughed, though there was no humor in it. You want me to go into hiding with a man I have never spoken to in person before this moment? A man whose reputation is built on exactly the kind of violence Tobias is threatening? For a long moment, Konstantin was silent. Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a photograph, old, worn at the edges, clearly cherished for many years. It showed a young woman with dark hair and bright eyes, her hand resting on a small but visible baby bump. She was beautiful. And she was smiling at the camera with the kind of love that made my heart ache. Her name was Serafina, he said quietly. She was 24 years old when this photo was taken. She died 3 weeks later, along with my daughter, because I was fighting a war across the city and no one was there to protect her when my enemies came for her. I have spent 18 years building an empire on the graves of the men responsible. I have spent 18 years ensuring that no one I protect will ever suffer the way she did. He put the photograph away, his movements careful, almost reverent. I do not expect you to trust me based on my reputation, Delara. I expect you to trust me based on my actions. I have asked nothing from you. I have taken nothing from you. I have only tried to give you the safety I could not give her. And I am asking you now, please, let me keep my promise. There are moments in life when you stand at a crossroads, and every logical thought points one direction while your heart screams another. Every rational part of my brain was telling me to refuse, to go to the police, to find another way. But my heart recognized something in this man that transcended his reputation. A brokenness that mirrored my own. A need to protect that went beyond reason. A love for a woman long dead that had transformed into a mission to save a stranger. Okay, I heard myself say. I will go with you. The relief that washed over his features was so profound that I felt tears prick my eyes. Thank you, he said, and for the first time, his voice cracked with emotion. Thank you for trusting me. The safe house was a mansion on a private estate 2 hours outside the city, surrounded by acres of forests and protected by more security than I had ever seen in my life. It was beautiful in a stark, imposing way, all stone and glass and carefully manicured gardens. But it also felt like a fortress, and I supposed that was exactly the point. Konstantin installed me in a suite of rooms on the second floor, complete with a private bathroom, a small kitchenette, and windows that looked out over a tranquil lake. A doctor was brought in to ensure the baby was healthy after the stress of the day. A chef prepared meals tailored to my pregnancy cravings. And Konstantin himself visited every evening to check on me, his presence both comforting and terrifying in equal measure. Tell me about her, I asked on the third night, when the silence between us had grown comfortable enough for honest questions. Tell me about Serafina. He was standing by the window, gazing out at the darkening sky, his profile sharp against the fading light. For a long moment, I thought he would refuse. Then he spoke, and his voice carried the weight of 18 years of grief. She was a dancer. Classical ballet. She moved like music made visible, like every step was a conversation with something divine. I met her at a charity gala, my first attempt at legitimacy, at pretending I was something other than what I was. She saw through me immediately. And somehow, impossibly, she loved me anyway. He turned to face me, and the pain in his eyes was ancient. She knew what I was. She knew the danger. But she believed I could be better, that our child could be the beginning of something new. I wanted to believe it too. I was so arrogant. I thought I could protect her while waging war on 3 rival families simultaneously. I was wrong. I listened as he described the day Serafina died, the phone call that came too late, the race across the city that felt like moving through molasses, the hospital room where he found her already gone, their daughter never having taken her first breath. He spoke without crying, but I could see the tears he had never allowed himself to shed shimmering in his eyes. I burned the world after that, he said quietly. I destroyed every person responsible, and then I kept destroying until there was no one left who could threaten what I had built. I became the monster they always accused me of being, because being a monster was easier than being a man who had failed the only people who mattered. I rose from my chair, no easy feat at 9 months pregnant, and crossed the room to where he stood. Without thinking, without analyzing, I took his hand in mine. It was warm, calloused, trembling slightly at my touch. You are not a monster, I said softly. A monster would not have answered a stranger's wrong number with kindness. A monster would not have spent weeks protecting a woman and child he had never met. You are a man who made terrible choices after terrible loss, but that does not erase the heart that still beats beneath the armor." He looked at our joined hands as if he had never seen such a thing before, as if human touch was something foreign and precious, long forgotten. "You should be running from me," he whispered. "Everyone runs from me eventually." I squeezed his fingers gently. "Maybe I am tired of running. Maybe, just this once, I want to stay." The days at the safe house took on a rhythm that surprised me with its gentleness. Morning tea brought by a kind woman named Vera, who served as housekeeper and surrogate grandmother to anyone who entered her orbit. Afternoon walks through the gardens, my swollen ankles protesting but my spirit craving the fresh air. Evening conversations with Konstantin that stretched long into the night, covering everything from philosophy to music to the names I was considering for my daughter. He suggested Mirabelle, beautiful and wonderful, and something in his eyes when he said it made my heart stumble. I had not told him that I had already been leaning toward that name. Hearing it from his lips felt like confirmation. He was working tirelessly to neutralize the threat from Tobias and his hired mercenaries. I saw the evidence in his exhaustion, the dark circles under his eyes, the way his phone was constantly buzzing with updates from his network. He shielded me from the details, but I caught fragments, intercepted communications, neutralized scouts, a web of protection being woven around both me and Yemisi back in the city. "Your sister is safe," he assured me when I expressed worry. "I have people watching her around the clock. No one will touch her." The thought of Yemisi surrounded by criminals should have horrified me. Instead, it comforted me. Because Konstantin's criminals were protecting her, and somehow, in the twisted logic of this new world, that made them the good guys. On the 5th day, I went into early labor. It began as a vague cramping, easily dismissed as the Braxton Hicks contractions I had been experiencing for weeks. But by midday, the pain had sharpened into something undeniable, and I found myself clutching the kitchen counter, unable to pretend anymore. Konstantin found me there, his face going pale as he realized what was happening. "The doctor is 30 minutes away," he said, his usual calm fracturing. "I am calling for a helicopter." "No," I gasped, breathing through a contraction. "No helicopters. Just stay with me. Please." So he stayed. He held my hand through the waves of pain, his grip steady even as his eyes betrayed his terror. He had been here before, I realized. He had watched Serafina labor, had felt helpless in the face of bringing life into the world. And now he was here again, with another woman, another child, and the ghosts of his past pressing close. The doctor arrived just as my contractions became too intense to speak through. She was an older woman with steady hands and a no-nonsense demeanor, and she took one look at me and announced that I was too far along to be moved. Mirabelle would be born in the safe house, ready or not. The next 8 hours were a blur of pain and pushing, of Konstantin's hand never leaving mine, of Vera bustling in with towels and whispered prayers. I had imagined giving birth alone, with only Yemisi for support. I had imagined fluorescent hospital lights and sterile efficiency. Instead, I gave birth in a mansion owned by a crime lord, surrounded by people who should have been strangers but somehow felt like family. Mirabelle Konstantin Vasiliev entered the world at 3:47 in the morning, screaming with the lungs of a child who had no intention of being ignored. She was perfect, 7 pounds, 2 ounces of fury and beauty, with a shock of dark hair and her father's determined chin. Wait. I had not meant to think of Konstantin that way. He was not her father. He was, what was he? My protector. My unlikely friend. The man who was weeping openly as he looked at my daughter, as if he was seeing a miracle he had never dared hope for. She is beautiful, he whispered, and his voice broke on the words. She is so beautiful, Delara. I reached out and touched his face, brushing away tears that matched my own. Would you like to hold her? The fear in his eyes was visceral. I have not. I never got to. He could not finish the sentence, but I understood. He had never held his own daughter. She had died before he could cradle her in his arms. 18 years of longing, compressed into this single moment. I placed Mirabelle into his arms, and I watched Konstantin Vasiliev, the wolf, the most feared man in the city, completely and utterly shatter. He held her as if she were made of glass and starlight, his large hands impossibly gentle around her tiny body. He whispered words in Russian that I did not understand, but the tenderness in them needed no translation. And in that moment, I realized the truth I had been fighting since the day I climbed into his car. I was falling in love with him. Impossibly. Irrationally. Completely. The days that followed Mirabelle's birth were a cocoon of warmth and wonder. Konstantin was ever present but never intrusive, always ready to hold her when I needed rest, always prepared with late-night bottles of formula to supplement my nursing. He sang to her in Russian, lullabies his own mother had sung to him, melodies that had survived generations of hardship. He told her stories of wolves and forests, of princesses and the men who would slay dragons for them. You have stolen his heart, Vera told me one morning, watching as Konstantin paced the garden with Mirabelle asleep against his chest. I have worked for him for 12 years, and I have never seen him smile the way he smiles now. You have given him something he thought was forever lost. I wanted to believe it. God, how I wanted to believe it. But there were still shadows looming at the edges of our fragile peace. Tobias Mercer was still out there. His mercenaries were still hunting. And no matter how safe the fortress, walls could always be breached. The attack came on Mirabelle's 12th day of life. I woke to the sound of gunfire, distant at first, then horrifyingly close. Konstantin burst into my room, his face a mask of cold fury, a weapon in his hand that looked like an extension of his body. They found us, he said, and his voice was death itself. Take Mirabelle. Go to the panic room. Do not come out until I come for you. He kissed my forehead, then Mirabelle's, and for a heartbeat, his mask slipped to reveal the terror beneath. I will not lose you, he swore. I will not lose either of you. Not again. And then he was gone, plunging into the chaos, and I was running toward the hidden room he had shown me on my first day, my newborn daughter clutched against my chest. The panic room was built like a bunker, reinforced walls, its own air supply, enough provisions to last weeks. I huddled in the corner with Mirabelle, her tiny body mercifully asleep against my racing heart, and I listened to the sounds of war outside. Gunshots. Explosions. Screaming. This was Konstantin's world, the world he had tried so hard to shield me from. This was what being loved by a man like him truly meant. The sounds faded after what might have been an hour or might have been an eternity. Silence fell, thick and suffocating. I waited for Konstantin to come. I waited for the door to open and his storm-gray eyes to find mine and his voice to tell me it was over. Instead, the door opened to reveal Tobias Mercer. He was bloodied, disheveled, his expensive suit torn and his face twisted with manic triumph. Behind him stood 2 mercenaries, their weapons trained on me. Found you, Tobias said, and his smile was the cruelest thing I had ever seen. The great Vasiliev thought he could hide you. Thought he could take what is mine. But I do not lose, Delara. I never lose. He crossed the room in 3 strides and grabbed my arm, hauling me upright. Mirabelle woke and screamed, her cries piercing the air like needles. "Shut that thing up," Tobias snarled, and one of the mercenaries raised his weapon toward my daughter. Time slowed. Crystallized. I felt something ancient and primal rise within me, a mother's fury, older than civilization, more powerful than any gun. I lunged at the mercenary, knocking his weapon aside, shielding Mirabelle with my body. The gunshot went wide, shattering something behind me. And then all hell broke loose. Konstantin appeared in the doorway like a vengeful god, his clothes soaked with blood that I prayed was not his own. He moved with a speed and precision that defied his injuries, taking down the first mercenary with a shot to the head, the second with a knife that materialized from somewhere I could not see. Tobias released me and scrambled backward, his triumph evaporating into pure terror. "Vasiliev, wait, we can negotiate." "No." Konstantin's voice was calm. Almost peaceful. "We cannot." He raised his weapon, and in his eyes I saw not a monster, but a man protecting his family. His finger tightened on the trigger. "Konstantin," I said softly. He paused. Turned to look at me. And in that moment of hesitation, I made a choice. He is not worth your soul. He is not worth becoming what they say you are. The silence stretched between us. Tobias was whimpering on the floor, all pretense of power stripped away. Mirabelle was crying in my arms. And Konstantin was standing at a crossroads, his past pulling him toward violence and his future offering something different. He lowered the weapon. "You are right," he said quietly. "He is not worth it." He gestured to men who had appeared behind him, his own people, I realized, bloodied but victorious. "Take him. Deliver him to the authorities. Make sure every piece of evidence regarding his crimes is included, including what he planned for Delara and the child." As Tobias was dragged away, screaming threats that no one acknowledged, Konstantin crossed to me and gathered us both into his arms. He was shaking. We were both shaking. But we were alive. All three of us were alive. "I thought I lost you," he whispered against my hair. "When I reached the panic room and you were not there, when I heard Mirabelle crying, I thought the worst had happened again. I thought I had failed again." I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. "You did not fail. You saved us. You saved us all." The aftermath was chaos, but it was the organized chaos of victory. Tobias Mercer was arrested within hours, the evidence against him so damning that even his political connections could not protect him. The mercenaries he had hired were scattered, their network dismantled by Konstantin's people. And the story that emerged in the press was carefully curated, a tale of a powerful businessman brought down by his own hubris, with no mention of organized crime or wolves in the shadows. Yemisi arrived at the safe house the day after the attack, her embrace so fierce that it left bruises. She had been frantic with worry, and the sight of me and Mirabelle safe and whole brought her to tears. She also brought news that changed everything. The authorities had found evidence in Tobias's files linking him to multiple disappearances and unsolved cases. He would spend the rest of his life in prison. He would never threaten us again. But that was not the news that mattered most. The news that mattered was something Yemisi had discovered while going through my medical records that Tobias had accessed as part of his campaign against me. "Delara," she said gently, taking my hand, "you should know. Mirabelle's blood work came back with an anomaly. They ran additional tests to be safe." My heart stopped. "What kind of anomaly? Is she sick? Is something wrong?" Yemisi smiled, and it was the most beautiful smile I had ever seen. Nothing is wrong. But the tests revealed something unexpected. Tobias Mercer is not her biological father. The room spun. What? But, how, I thought back to those final months of my relationship with Tobias, the cracks that had already formed, the arguments that had driven us apart even before I discovered the pregnancy. And then I thought further back, to a night I had almost forgotten, a night when I had been lonely and lost and had found comfort in the arms of a stranger at a charity gala. A stranger with dark hair and storm-gray eyes. A stranger whose face had lingered in my dreams long after the night was over. I looked at Konstantin, who was standing frozen in the doorway. He had heard everything. His face was pale, his eyes wide with a hope so fragile it looked like it might shatter at a breath. The charity gala, I whispered. The night we met. Before you gave me your card at the grocery store, we had already. He crossed the room in 3 strides and took my face in his hands. I never forgot you, he said, his voice raw. I never forgot that night. When I saw you drop your wallet, when I realized who you were, I thought I was losing my mind. I thought the universe was playing a cruel joke. And then your message arrived with that photograph, and I knew I had been given a second chance I did not deserve. Mirabelle was his daughter. Not Tobias's. His. The universe had twisted and turned in impossible ways, bringing us together through wrong numbers and mistaken texts and threats that had forced us into the same orbit. We had found each other twice, once in passion, once in desperation, and somehow, impossibly, we had created a family. He kissed me then, surrounded by chaos and blood and the wreckage of his enemies, and it was the most perfect moment of my entire life. I love you, he breathed against my lips. I have loved you since that first night, even when I could not remember your name. I have loved you since your photograph appeared on my phone and I saw the life we had created. I love you, Delara, and I will spend the rest of my existence proving I am worthy of that love. 1 year later, I stood in the garden of our home, not the safe house, but a new estate that Konstantin had purchased for us, filled with sunlight and laughter and the chaotic joy of a 1-year-old who had recently discovered the power of her own 2 feet. Mirabelle was toddling through the roses, her dark hair wild in the breeze, her storm-gray eyes, her father's eyes, bright with mischief. Konstantin was beside her, his massive frame folded into a crouch, his hands outstretched to catch her if she stumbled. He was singing to her in Russian, the same lullabies he had sung since her birth, and the sound of his voice wrapped around my heart like a promise kept. We had married 6 months after that terrible, wonderful night when everything changed. The ceremony was small, just Yemisi, Vera, and a handful of people Konstantin trusted with his life. I wore a simple white dress that made me feel like a bride in a fairy tale I never knew I was living. He wore all black, because some things about a person cannot change, but his eyes when he looked at me held more light than I had ever seen. I, Konstantin Vasiliev, take you, Delara Okonkwo, as my wife, my partner, and my forever home. I vow to protect you and our daughter with my last breath. I vow to be the man you believe I can be, even when I do not believe it myself. And I vow to love you with every broken piece of my heart, which you have somehow made whole. The empire he had built remained, but it was changing. Slowly, carefully, he was transitioning his operations toward legitimacy, investments, real estate, technology ventures that operated in the light rather than the shadows. It would take years, perhaps decades, but he was committed. For Mirabelle. For me. For the second chance he refused to waste. Papa. Mirabelle's voice rang across the garden, delighted and demanding. She had reached the fountain at the center of the rose maze and was attempting to climb into it. Konstantin scooped her up with practiced ease, laughing as she protested. "Not today, little wolf. Your mother will blame me if you arrive at your birthday party soaked." Her birthday party. Our home would soon be filled with the children of Konstantin's legitimate business partners, with Yemisi and her new boyfriend, with Vera and the staff who had become family. A year ago, I had been alone and terrified, hiding in my sister's apartment, convinced I would face motherhood without support. Now I was surrounded by love so abundant that some days I could not breathe for the joy of it. Konstantin carried Mirabelle toward me, and the sight of them together, this man who had been called a monster, this child who was living proof of grace and redemption, filled me with a peace I had never known was possible. "She wants to show you something," he said, settling our daughter into my arms. Mirabelle's chubby fingers reached toward my face, patting my cheek with the clumsy affection of toddlers everywhere. "Mama," she said proudly. "Mama." It was only her second word. Her first, of course, had been Papa. She had spoken it for the first time on a night when Konstantin was convinced she was too young to recognize him, when his old fears about being worthy of her love had risen to choke him. Her tiny voice breaking through those fears had undone him completely. He had wept for an hour. We had not hidden the truth of our beginnings from each other, even when that truth was painful. Konstantin had confessed every dark deed of his past, every life he had taken, every choice he was not proud of. I had confessed my own failures, the way I had stayed with Tobias long after I knew he was cruel, the way I had almost given up when I discovered the pregnancy, the way I had spent years believing I did not deserve more than the scraps of love that others offered me. We had laid our wounds bare and chosen each other anyway. That was what redemption looked like, I had learned. Not the erasure of the past, but the courage to build something better despite it. Yemisi arrived early for the party, her arms full of gifts and her smile full of the joy that had become permanent since she had finally allowed herself to fall in love. She had found him through one of Konstantin's security team, a quiet, thoughtful man named Dmitri who treated her like she hung the moon. I suspected a wedding announcement was coming soon. "Look at you," she said, pulling me into a hug. "A year ago, you were sleeping on my couch. Now you are hosting birthday parties in a mansion. Life is absolutely insane." "The best kind of insane," I agreed, hugging her back. And I meant it. Every word. The party was chaos in the best possible way, children running through the gardens, adults laughing over wine, Mirabelle presiding over it all like the tiny empress she was becoming. Konstantin moved through the crowd with an ease that still surprised me, his old reputation fading with every legitimate handshake, every genuine smile. He would never be fully accepted by polite society, and there would always be those who whispered about his past. But he no longer cared about their opinions. He cared only about us. At sunset, when the guests had gone and Mirabelle was asleep in her nursery, Konstantin and I stood together on the balcony overlooking the lake. The sky was painted in shades of gold and rose, and the water reflected it like a mirror. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small velvet box, not a ring, we were already married, but something else. Inside was a delicate gold locket, engraved with roses and wolves intertwined. "Open it," he urged. I did. Inside were two tiny photographs. On one side, a sonogram image, our second child, just discovered last week, growing safe and strong beneath my heart. On the other side, a photo of Serafina and the daughter they had lost, preserved forever in gold. "They are part of our family too," Konstantin said softly. "I want them to be remembered." I want our children to know that they have sisters in heaven watching over them. I threw my arms around him, tears streaming down my face. This man. This impossible, beautiful, redeemed man. He had shown me that love could come from the most unexpected places. He had shown me that monsters were often just people in too much pain to be gentle. And he had shown me that wrong numbers, sometimes, led exactly where you were always meant to be. If you have made it this far, I want to take a moment to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Stories like this take so much time and love to create, and your presence here means everything. If this story touched you, if it made you feel something, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit that subscribe button if you have not already, and know that doing so helps us continue telling stories of love, redemption, and unexpected grace. If you scroll away without subscribing after coming this far, I will be genuinely heartbroken, but I trust that you will do the right thing. Sometimes the greatest love stories begin with a mistake. Sometimes the person you are meant to find is hidden behind a wrong number, a misread intention, a moment of chaos that transforms into destiny. I never expected to send my baby bump photo to a Mafia boss. I never expected him to respond with kindness. I never expected that response to lead me to my husband, the father of my children, the man who showed me what it meant to be truly protected and truly loved. But that is exactly what happened. And if my story has taught me anything, it is this: trust the wrong turns. Trust the mistakes. Trust that even when the path is terrifying, it might be leading you exactly where you need to go. After all, the best stories are not the ones that go according to plan. They are the ones that surprise you. And this story, our story, was the greatest surprise of my life.